I'm Jake, 24, a guy who lives like the wind, free, untethered, chasing the next moment without a map. No college degree, no 9 to 5, just odd jobs that pay for my bunk at a rundown hostel and beers with my buddies. One scorching afternoon, my friend Ryan shot me a text that changed everything. My aunt needs her fence painted. Easy gig, good money. You down? I didn't think twice. I said yes. But when I met Sarah, the woman waiting behind that weathered gate, I felt something shift inside me, like the first note of a song you know you'll never forget. The sun was relentless as I walked through a suburban neighborhood that felt like it belonged in a postcard. Perfectly trimmed lawns, houses with pristine shutters, kids' bikes leaning against garages. I was out of place in my faded black tee, jeans streaked with dirt, and sneakers that had seen better days. My backpack slung over one shoulder held nothing but a water bottle and my phone, the sum of my plans for the day. I checked Ryan's text again, confirming the address, and stopped in front of a modest but well-kept house. That's when I saw her. Sarah was standing on the porch, a hose in one hand, watering a row of vibrant marigolds. She looked mid-30s, her brown hair loosely tied in a messy bun, strands falling around her face like they had a mind of their own. She wore a simple white tank top and denim shorts, her movements calm and deliberate. There was a grace to her, not the kind that screams for attention, but the kind that pulls you in before you realize it. She glanced up, catching my eye, and smiled, a smile that was soft but carried a spark, like she knew something I didn't. Jake, right? Her voice was warm, smooth, like a breeze on a summer night. I'm Sarah. Thanks for coming out. I nodded, suddenly aware of how dry my mouth felt. Yeah, no problem. Just point me to the fence. She laughed, a light sound that made my chest tighten for reasons I couldn't name. Follow me. The fence was a long stretch of weathered wood wrapping around her backyard, gray and splintered from years of sun and neglect. It wasn't falling apart, but it was begging for a fresh start. Sarah handed me a can of white paint, a brush, and a roller, her fingers brushing mine for a split second. I don't know if I imagined the electricity in that touch, but it lingered. Take your time, she said, her eyes meeting mine. I'd rather it be done right than rushed. I'll check on you in a bit. I set up my supplies, the rhythmic slap of paint against wood, grounding me as the sun climbed higher, the heat pressed against my skin, sweat beading on my forehead. But there was something satisfying about the work. Each stroke felt like I was covering up the past, giving the fence a chance to be something new. Every now and then, I glanced toward the house. Through the big bay windows, I caught glimpses of Sarah, moving through the kitchen, talking on the phone, or sitting on the porch with a book. She was a mystery, one I didn't know I wanted to solve. About an hour in, the screen door creaked and Sarah stepped out with a glass of lemonade, ice clinking against the sides. Thought you might need this, she said, handing it to me. Her fingers were cool from the glass, and her smile was genuine, not the polite kind you give a stranger. Thanks, I said, taking a long sip. The tartness hit my tongue, sharp and refreshing. You didn't have to. She shrugged, leaning against a porch post. You're doing a great job. Better than I expected, honestly. I raised an eyebrow, grinning. Low expectations, huh? She laughed again, and damn, that sound was starting to feel like a drug. Let's just say I've had some bad experiences with handymen. We chatted for a few minutes, small talk mostly. She worked from home, something about consulting for tech companies. I told her about my odd jobs, how I'd been a dishwasher, a delivery guy, even a dog walker for a week. She listened, really listened, her eyes locked on mine like she was trying to figure me out. I didn't mention the hostel, or how I was one bad week away from sleeping in my car. I didn't want her to see me as a drifter, even if that's exactly what I was. As she walked back to the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about her. She wasn't just Ryan's aunt. She was someone who'd lived a life I couldn't imagine, someone who carried a weight she didn't show. And yet, there was this warmth to her, like she was inviting me to see past the surface, even if just a little. The afternoon wore on, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows across the yard. I was lost in the rhythm of painting when I heard her voice again, soft and teasing, right behind me. You know, Jake, if I were your age, I'd invite you inside. My heart slamming against my ribs. Did I hear that right? I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a glint in her eyes, a challenge, like she was testing me. For a second, I didn't know what to say. My mind raced, caught between shock and a sudden, reckless curiosity. I forced a chuckle, wiping sweat from my brow. "Is that so?" She tilted her head, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "But I'm not your age, so keep painting." And just like that, she turned and walked back to the house, her hips swaying just enough to make me question everything. I stood there, brush in hand, the heat of the day suddenly feeling like it was coming from inside me. That moment, those words, they burned into me. I didn't know what she meant, not really, but I knew I wasn't going to forget them. The next morning, I woke up on my lumpy hostel mattress, the words still echoing in my head. "If I were your age, I'd invite you inside." It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, playful but deliberate, like she knew exactly how it would rattle me. I stared at the cracked ceiling, my mind replaying every glance, every smile. I told myself to shake it off. This was just a job. I'd finish the fence, get paid, and move on. That's how my life worked. But when I got to Sarah's house, my resolve wavered. She was outside, kneeling in the garden, a pair of sunglasses perched on her head, wearing a flowy sundress that caught the breeze. She looked up as I approached, her face lighting up. "Morning, Jake. Ready to wrap this up?" "Morning," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Yeah, let's do this." I got back to work, the familiar rhythm of painting pulling me in. But every time Sarah moved past the windows or stepped outside, my focus slipped. There was an energy between us, unspoken but undeniable. I could feel her watching me sometimes, her gaze lingering just long enough to make my pulse quicken. I wondered if she felt it too, or if I was just a kid reading too much into a woman's kindness. Around noon, she brought out a bottle of water, her fingers brushing mine again as she handed it over. "You're a lifesaver," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. She smiled, sitting on the porch steps, her elbows resting on her knees. "You're the one saving my fence. I owe you." I took a sip, leaning against the fence post. "So, what's the deal with this place? You always lived here alone?" Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she recovered. "Not always, but it's just me now. Easier that way?" I nodded, sensing the weight behind her words. I wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers of her story, but something told me to wait. Instead, I said, "Must be nice, having your own space." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "It is, but it can get quiet, too quiet sometimes." That moment felt like a door cracking open, just enough to let me glimpse the real Sarah. Not the confident woman who teased me yesterday, but someone who'd been hurt, someone who'd learned to guard her heart. I didn't push, but I felt a pull toward her, a need to know more, to be someone she could let in, even if just for a moment. By late afternoon, I was down to the last section of fence. The job was nearly done, and I found myself slowing down, not ready to leave. Sarah's backyard felt like a sanctuary, a world away from the chaos of my life, the noisy hostel, the endless hustle for cash, the nights spent dodging questions about my future. Here, with the smell of fresh paint and the sound of birds chirping, I felt calm. It was a feeling I wasn't used to. I was cleaning my brush when Sarah appeared, leaning against the back door frame, her arms crossed. "Looks good," she said, nodding at the fence. "You've got a real talent." I grinned, brushing my hands on my jeans. "Just a guy with a paintbrush." She shook her head, her smile warm. "You're more than that. Come inside. You've earned a cold drink." My gut told me to say no, to keep things simple, to walk away before I got in too deep. But my gut wasn't calling the shots anymore. "Sure," I said, following her inside. Her house was exactly what I'd imagined, modern but cozy, with soft beige walls, a plush couch, and shelves lined with books and framed photos. I noticed an old wedding picture on a side table, the groom's face blurred by time, but Sarah's smile was unmistakable, younger, unguarded. It hit me then. She'd had a life before this, one that didn't end the way she'd hoped. She handed me a glass of iced tea, the ice clinking as I took it. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the kitchen island. I did, and we talked, really talked. I told her about my life, how I'd dropped out of community college because it felt like a cage, how I'd rather scrape by than commit to a path I didn't believe in. She listened, her eyes soft, her fingers tracing the rim of quietly. "A long time ago, I thought I could outrun the world, live for the moment, no regrets. What changed? I asked, my voice low. She looked away, her gaze drifting to the window. Life, marriage, kids, losing it all. You learn to build walls after a while. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her she didn't have to carry that alone, but I stayed still. You don't seem like someone who's given up, I said instead. She smiled, a mix of sadness and strength. I haven't, but I'm careful now. The conversation shifted to lighter things, music, movies, the time I tried to surf and nearly drowned. We laughed, the kind of laughter that feels like a release. Then she pulled out a bottle of red wine. Stay for a glass? I hesitated. This was a line, and we both knew it. But the pull was too strong. Yeah, I said. Why not? We moved to the living room, the wine loosening our words, the space between us shrinking. The lamp cast a warm glow, and Sarah's laughter was softer now, her eyes brighter. I told her about the time I hitchhiked across Nevada, and she shared a story about sneaking into a concert when she was 19. It was easy, like we'd known each other forever. As the night deepened, the air grew heavy with something unspoken. Sarah set her glass down, her movements slow, deliberate. She turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake, I don't do this. Not anymore. Do what? I asked, my heart racing. This, she said, and then she leaned in, her lips brushing mine. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. I kissed her back, my hand finding her cheek, her skin warm under my fingers. The world fell away, and all that existed was her breath, her touch, the way she melted into me. That night was ours, a moment stolen from time. There was no rush, no need to define it. We moved together, guided by instinct, by a shared hunger for something real, even if it was fleeting. I didn't think about tomorrow, and neither did she. It was perfect in its imperfection. I woke up in her bed, the morning light filtering through half-open blinds. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender, and for a moment, I just lay there, letting the quiet sink in. Sarah was already up, the sound of a coffee maker humming from the kitchen. I pulled on my jeans and shirt, my mind replaying the night before. No regrets, but a question lingered. What now? In the kitchen, Sarah stood barefoot, wearing leggings and a loose sweater, stirring cream into her coffee. She looked up, her smile calm, knowing. Morning. Coffee? Yeah, I said, taking the mug she offered. We stood across from each other, leaning against opposite counters, the silence comfortable but charged. I didn't know the rules for this, didn't know if there were rules. Finally, she spoke. Last night, I don't make a habit of that, Jake. I know, I said, meeting her eyes. I don't either. She nodded, sipping her coffee. I like you. You're easy to be around, but this can't be more than it is. I swallowed, nodding. I get it. No strings. Her shoulders relaxed, and she gave me a small smile. Good. I left soon after, the morning air cool against my skin. As I walked back to the hostel, my mind was a mess of emotions. Exhilaration, confusion, a strange sense of peace. Sarah wasn't just a fling. She was a mirror, showing me parts of myself I hadn't faced. And I think I was the same for her. Over the next few days, I tried to go back to my routine, bussing tables, mowing lawns, drinking cheap beer with Ryan at dive bars. But Sarah was there, in the back of my mind, her voice, her touch, the way she looked at me like I was more than a screw-up. I didn't call her, didn't text. I told myself it was better that way. But a week later, I found myself back on her street, my feet carrying me to her gate without a plan. I stood there, heart pounding, wondering if I was making a mistake. I knocked anyway. Sarah opened the door, her hair loose, wearing a simple blouse and jeans. Surprise flickered across her face, then softened into a smile. Jake, hey. I was in the neighborhood, I lied. Thought I'd say hi. She stepped aside. Come in. We sat at her kitchen table, iced tea between us, and talked. This time, it was different, deeper, rawer. She told me about her daughter, now in college, who barely called, about her ex-husband who'd left scars she didn't show. I used to think I'd have it all figured out by now, she said, staring into her glass. But life doesn't work like that. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. You're doing better than you think. She looked at me, her eyes glassy. We spent the afternoon together, too young to cooking a simple dinner, pasta with marinara, a salad we threw together from whatever was in her fridge. It felt normal, easy, like we were two people who'd found a rhythm. I didn't stay the night, but when I hugged her at the door, she held on a little longer, her breath warm against my shoulder. Our connection grew, undefined but steady. I'd stop by to fix a leaky faucet or just sit on her porch, sipping wine and talking about nothing. Some weeks we saw each other often, others we didn't. It never felt forced. Sarah had a way of making me feel seen, like my lack of direction wasn't a flaw but a choice. And I think I gave her something too, a reminder that she was still alive, still wanted. One day, as we sat on her couch, her head resting on my shoulder, she said, "You know this can't last, right?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, I know." She lifted her head, her eyes searching mine. "I don't want to hurt you, Jake, and I don't want to be hurt." "You won't," I said, and I meant it. "This is enough." But life doesn't pause for moments like that. A few weeks later, I got a lead on a cheap apartment across town. Not much, but a step up from the hostel. I told Sarah one evening, the words heavier than I expected. "I'll be farther away, won't make it out here as much." She nodded, her expression calm but distant. "That's good. You need your own space. Something real." I looked at her, trying to read the emotions behind her words. "This was real, Sarah. You know that, right?" She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I know." We stood in her kitchen, the silence thick with everything we didn't say. I pulled her into a hug, her body soft against mine. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." She pulled back, touching my cheek. "Thank you for seeing me." I walked out her door, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I didn't look back, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew I had to keep moving. Sarah and I weren't a love story, not the kind you see in movies. We were two people who crossed paths when we needed each other most, who gave each other a moment of truth, then let go. No promises, no regrets. Back at the hostel, I packed my few belongings, my mind replaying every moment with Sarah. I didn't feel empty. I felt full, not of answers, but of possibility. She'd shown me that life isn't about having it all figured out. It's about the people who make you feel alive, even if they're only in your story for a chapter. As I sit here now, in my new apartment, the walls bare but mine, I think about what Sarah and I had. It wasn't love, not in the way people define it. It was connection, raw and real, a reminder that sometimes the best moments come without labels. I'm still the same Jake, living day by day, chasing the wind, but I'm different too. I carry her with me, not as a weight, but as a light. To you watching this, I want you to think about the people who've walked into your life, maybe just for a moment, and changed you. Maybe it was a stranger, a friend, someone you never expected. What did they teach you? What did you leave behind? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one. And if this story hit you, hit that like button, subscribe to the Cheater's Diary, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next tale of fleeting connections and the moments that shape us. We're here every week, diving into the messy, beautiful truth of human relationships. Join us, and let's keep the conversation going.